Greetings and welcome to Writers on Writing. I'm your host, Dr. Brenda Greene. Writers on Writing is paid for by Medgar Evers College, this radio station. We come to you every weekend and give you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers throughout the African diaspora talk about their work, their craft, and their lives. And we are very pleased to have with us today Ibi Zoboi. And I hope I've corrected. Let me start over. I'm going to start. Let me stop.
Okay.
Just a minute. Let me stop. Greetings and welcome to Writers on Writing. I'm your host, Dr. Brenda Greene, Executive Director and founder of the Center for Black Literature. Writers on Writing is paid for by Medgar Evers College's radio station. We come to you every Sunday and give you, our listening audience, to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work and their lives and their craft. And we also give you an opportunity to see writers on our YouTube page at Center for Black Literature. So I am very, very pleased to have with me today the extraordinary and prolific author, Ibi Zoboi. Welcome, Ibi.
Thank you, Dr. Greene. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. And we were reminiscing about the fact that I actually met you a number of years ago when you were one of the teaching artists in our program. And I said, this is the same person who's written so many books. And I'd like to just share with our listening audience and our viewing audience some information about you. You are a New York Times best-selling author of American Street, also My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich, your middle grade debut novel, co-author of Punching the Air with prison reform activist Dr. Yusef Salaam of the Exonerated Five, editor of Black Enough, Stories of Being Young in Black America. Your debut book was The People Remember, received a Coretta Scott King Award. Star Child, a biographical constellation of Octavia Butler's work. And Okoye, To the People, a Black Panther novel. You have such a wide range of genres that you've touched for our youth, all ages. And also you've won a number of awards, which include the National Book Award finalist, the New York Notable Times Book Award, the Walter Award for Teen Category, the Walter Award Honor Young People's Category Award, the Coretta Scott King Award. I encourage you to visit the website of Ibi Zoboi to really get a full overview of her work. So we're going to just start by just talking about how you came into writing. What was your journey like becoming a YA and middle grade authors? And then we'll talk a little bit about your books and the themes that you've chosen to write about, which I think really resonated with me as a mother of two sons. So let's begin with your journey. What was your journey like getting to this point?
Oh, wow. It was a long journey, and I have been unwavering and consistent in trying to become a published author. I don't think that was necessarily the goal, but I think being published by a major publishing house was just the path that would lead me to my actual goal, which is telling stories and being a documentarian in some way and a cultural custodian, which is what an elder had said to me. Cultural custodians just hold the culture close and really impart some of those wisdoms and knowledges onto the next generation. And the best way to do that oftentimes is through either you're an educator like yourself or you're a writer and you tell stories and you share stories. So I've been both. I still feel like I am an educator, but writing is the one that fuels my passion. I love to write. I love to think up stories and to really document the experiences of people of African descent in this country and in other parts of the world. So I did not get published until I was 39 years old, but I have been writing my entire adult life. And I started in college and I wrote Octavia Butler's first biography, published biography for children. And I met her in 2000. And I think I told you this story, but I first met Octavia Butler at your bookstore in Brooklyn,
Okay.
in Carew Books, right off of Flatbush Avenue. And she had a reading at Carew Books in April 2000. I don't remember what date, but that's what sort of started it all because I gave her a ride after that.
Okay.
And I took her to a hotel in Manhattan. I told a fib. I said it was on my way, but I was going in the opposite direction to Queens. And that evening she won, and I wasn't there. She won the Nebula Award for Parable of the Talents, which is the sequel to Parable of the Sower, the book that everyone is reading now. So that was 20, nearly 25 years ago. And this is me as a young person seeking out wise people. And up until that point, I was that kind of student where I wasn't looking to celebrities or even my celebrity professors. I was the kind of young woman who really wanted to be around smart people. And the smartest people were usually the elders, the older people. And that's what started it all. It was another professor who really encouraged me to write. The first time I ever heard of Octavia Butler was a professor who wrote me a check for me to attend the Yari Yari conference at
Oh, yes, I
NYU.
remember.
It was in 1997, fall of 1997. And a professor just recognized my passion for writing. And she was says, you have to go to this conference. Here is a check. You just have to do me one favor. And I don't remember what book she gave me. She was like, you just have to get this signed by Octavia Butler. And I didn't know who she was. I was like, okay. And then the rest, as they say, is history.
Right. What an inspirational story. And I'm wondering how much your background experience, your parents are from Haiti. I think you grew up, you're Haitian, and
Yes.
you grew up surrounded by culture, and this comes across in your books, in the themes. How much of that do you think had an impact on on your development as a writer and on the themes, the many themes that you have in your literature, which are African centered and many connected to spirituality and speculative fiction and the culture, talking about the culture. How did that impact your family's experience and your growing up surrounded by people who believed in this? And I don't know if you even did you go to an African centered school?
Oh no, yeah, I can tell you all about that
Okay.
too. My being Haitian has a huge impact on everything that I write. My upbringing has a huge impact on what I write. Everything that I write is not from lived experience. It is from experience, but not lived experience. And I just saw someone posted on social media that Nikki Giovanni said something to the effect of, we don't write from experience. If we did, we'd have one or two books. We write from empathy. And that really resonated with me because I am able to write so many books because I'm writing from empathy. I am writing from what I care about in the world. And I do care about culture. I was not raised in a family that celebrated culture, which is why I crave it and why I write about it. And there's a reason for that. And once I learned why, let's say I grew up Haitian and never learned about the Haitian Revolution until I was in college. I never really learned about slavery until I did my own reading because I went to predominantly white Catholic schools. I really, once I learned what I wanted to learn, I discovered African cultures in the African diaspora, which is how I raised my children.
Okay.
And I can write about that. So at a very young age, at 18, not, relatively young age, at 18 and 19, I completely changed my lifestyle because of the books that I've read and the professors that I met. So my mother and my upbringing is very different than how I'm raising my children.
Right.
And it's because of what I lacked growing up that I think I overcompensated for it in my adult life. And I write about that. I
Okay.
write about that overcompensation and I am writing about that lack. So all those themes show up in my work.
Right. And I would never think that you didn't know that because you have such an intimate knowledge. I mean, Nigeria Jones, I read it and also listened to it. So let's just talk about that. Like there's so many themes, as I said, that come across in this story, the young girl who is raised in an Afrocentric um, cultural nationalist household, but who has all of these who's conflicted and who's suffering. And you have grief and you have the mother-daughter relationship. You talk about loss. Tell us about what motivated you to tell the story of Nigeria Jones, whose name just symbolizes the 70s, right?
It does. It does. And I have like I was part of like some college courses and some community organizations. I went to Hunter College. I transferred from Hofstra to Hunter College. And I really embraced the teachings of Dr. Marimba Ani, who used to be called Donna Richards, who was part of the SNCC movement.
Right.
So she was part of the Black and Puerto Rican Studies program department. And it used to be Black and Puerto Rican Studies Department. I don't think it's called that anymore.
It's Latino. I think it's
Latino.
yes.
Yeah. So probably Africana studies now.
Yes.
But I know the history of the department where it was Black and Puerto Rican students who advocated for it in the late 1960s. So I took almost nearly all her courses. At the same time, I had friends. This was a time in the late 90s where I had friends who knew your son, Talib Kweli, and were hanging out in Fort Greene. And it was a part of a rich Afrocentric movement. We talk about the 70s, maybe the late 80s, but there was sort of a renaissance in the late 90s that I was part of. And that's not documented, probably because it's so close to now. It's only 30, 20 years ago. Is it 20? Yeah, 20, a little 20 years
Yes.
ago. And it's it was something that just like opened up in me this new world, new passion for where do we really come from and who we really are. So, you know, I think what was your original question? Because I could really go,
Yeah, I said Nigeria Jones.
oh
And I
yeah,
said it
yeah,
just represents the movement and the conflicts and the spirituality, cultural nationalism, what we were talking about.
right.
And how did you what motivated you to tell that story, which I said resonated with me, naming my sons Talib Kweli and Jamal
Yeah.
Kwame.
I knew some people. This conversation came with a friend, with a friend I was having who still thinks that I wrote about her life. It's not about her life at all. Because I've met other people who grew up that way. And I mean, there were so many, even some of my professors' kids, some other people I've met along the way. I was always fascinated by those of us who were able to separate ourselves, those of us uh, who understood that there was an alternate way of living. I even met Haitians who grew up culturally rooted, Haitians who are my age who grew up practicing Vodou, and I'm fascinated by that, whose parents were artists. I grew up in a very strict household where as soon as I went natural, my mother shunned me. And then I met Haitians who had locks growing up. And I was like, why couldn't that be me? But what kind of thinking do your parents have had? What sort of worldview would your parents have to had to allow you to grow up that way? And many of them, when they grew up that way, they kind of did not continue on in those same beliefs. And what happens when you grow up in such a strict environment that we think it's good for you, but it's so oppressive that you go the opposite direction.
Yes.
I am telling the story of myself as well, even though it was an Afrocentric community. I'm saying, well, it could have been the same as a Catholic, in a Catholic household, wanting to become Afrocentric. It's the opposite. So I know a lot about Afrocentric movements because I kind of stepped into those worlds and studied them and read about them and talked to people. And it's not hard to figure out how to tell a story of a teen girl rebelling against their parents' idea.
Right. So just give us a brief synopsis of that story, of her story.
So Nigeria Jones is a 16-year-old girl who grows up in a Pan-African or Afrocentric community, separatist community, and her father is the leader of an organization called the Movement. And by the movement, I mean that they grow up Afrocentric, they're vegan, they're communal in that he opens up his home to community members in need, and he homeschools his children and he recruits new members. He's trying to save the people. And there is a person that I had in mind in thinking about the father, that is Umar Johnson and his teachings. And I always wondered, wow, what are his kids like? Do they embrace everything he says or do they shun it? And in stepping into my 16-year-old character's shoes, I followed her on the journey. The other aspect about the story is that her mother is not there when you
Yes.
start reading the book. And as I'm writing the story, I don't know what happened to the mother either. And
Oh, okay.
slowly it reveals to me, and it is also a story about autonomy and at the micro level, and it's a story about body autonomy in this country, communal
Yes.
autonomy in this country. A 16-year-old girl deciding for herself what values she wants to live by, her mother deciding for herself what values she wants to live by, and her father deciding for himself what kind of community he wants to live in and what kind of community he wants to lead.
Yes. Yes. Powerful story. So
Thank
just if we can switch over to, no, let me just go back for a moment because you talked about the movement not being documented, what was happening in the 90s and 2000s. And I went to the Furious Flower Poetry Festival and was a panel there that just described that movement. Jessica Kier Moore
I
was
was,
the
yeah,
MC.
yeah.
You were there?
No, I was not there. I was
Oh,
there
you were
with
there in that
Jessica Care
space.
Moore.
Yes, yes,
No,
she,
when
yes,
she used to perform in Fort Greene.
yes. She talked about that, but Tony Medina,
Yeah.
Brad Walfron, they talked about that period. They talked about Nkuru.
Mhm.
And they talked about the fact that this has not been documented. And the poets who came of age during that period have not been documented in the same way that our poets in the Black arts movement have been. So it's time to do that. So I just wanted to speak to that, that I think it's really important. We need an SOS, some mere Sonia Sanchez did co-edited a book called SOS, or the Black Arts Reader. We need something like that that represents that generation, because many of the poets and the artists
Mhm.
and the musicians are really at their prime. So I want to support that, the importance.
Absolutely. Just and it was a whole era of Erica Badu being nurtured in that
Yes,
community in Brooklyn,
yes,
Common coming to this,
that's
era,
right.
and Black Star and The Roots, and it was a zeitgeist, and I was in it, not part of it, not one of those people. If there was any sort of collection, I wouldn't be part of it because I was a little younger and just watching it. I was observing it. And I credit that space to the writer that I am now, because it was in those spaces that I discovered speculative fiction, that a friend gave me Octavia Butler's first
Yeah.
novels.
Yes.
So I don't know how that could happen. If it happens, and if you know anything, please let me know.
Well, I think it's,
Saul Williams was part of it, and you
that's
know,
right. That's when I met all of them. I met all of them at Inkuru. So I think someone has to take the lead, and you've done the anthology that you've done. I haven't read the stories in it, but you're the writer, so you can bring it all together
oh
with
man,
some
yeah, that
co-editors. That's, I think it would be important to document that. But I
yeah.
want to go over to the story Punching in the Air, which is so moving. The parts of that story when I wanted to, almost brought me to tears. When I think about what happened to this young man, it's so symbolic of what happened to so many young men, and the importance of the arts and poetry. Tell us about this. Give us a brief synopsis of Punching in the Air, which is really a poem.
Mhm.
It's really poetry. It's very lyrical, and it's really deep.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for reading my books and recognizing them for what they are. Um, and before I share what the synopsis is, this is a perfect segue because I met Yusef Salam during that time in
Oh,
1999.
yes.
And because I was in those spaces that allowed me to be in the same room with Yusef, I was in one of Dr. Marimba Ani's classes, and in he walks into the classroom, and Dr. Marimba Ani turns around and immediately says, I knew you didn't do it. I knew you didn't do it. We're like, who is this
Oh,
guy? Who is this? And then, by the end of the class, and this is before social media, you can't Google him until he shares his name. And we don't remember because, we were college students. So we were all in elementary school at that time. And we're like, wow, he's one of the Central Park Five. And I was an editor at my college's newspaper, and I immediately approached him and asked for an interview, but he was not ready to give interviews. In hindsight, and he told me later on, he was still on probation as a sexual offender too, and he was not ready to talk because the world still thought he was guilty. He
yes,
served his time. So it's not like you can talk after you're exonerated or anything like that. Nothing had come out that changed the outcome of the case. So Punching the Air is a fictionized version of Yusef's story. That's my Our main character, Amal, is not accused of a sexual assault, but he gets into a fight, and the boy goes into a coma, and he's wrongly accused, because he believes that he did not throw that last punch. The boy was still standing when he turned his back and walked away. And there's something about his trial that goes wrong, and he's sent to jail. And it's not a book about the crime or the legal process. It's the emotional journey of a boy, contending with himself, his feelings, his family, his friends, that one night that changed his life forever and what the future looks like for him. And we decided to write this book together. And me as a woman, I'm like, what can I say about a 16-year-old boy? And he was like, you're perfect for this because it was the women who held me down. And if
Yeah.
you watched When They See Us,
Yeah.
the Alpha DuVernay told the story about their lives on Netflix, Yusef was the only one whose mother advocated for him, and his mother did not allow to give a written testimony, written confession, a forced written confession. And his mother is still an activist till today, um, Sharon Salam. And he was like, it was the women who held me down, his sister, his mother, the women in his family. And he said, of course, a woman needs to write this with me. So I did the writing, and based on interviews and conversations with him. And some of the poems are his poems that
That's
he
what I
had
thought.
written,
Yes.
yeah, while he was incarcerated. And
Mhm.
that's how it all started because I'd seen him at a book festival selling his chapbook. And the Netflix movie had not come out yet, but the documentary had been out. The Tim Burns or Burns documentary about the Central Park Five had already come out. And here I was, a published author, and publishers were paying big money for these sort of, issues, social justice books
Right.
by Black authors. And I told them that. I'm like, there is no reason that you are peddling your chapbooks, which is great, but the publishers want to hear your story. So that's how it started that we collaborated, but we actually met April of 1999, 10 years after the incident, in fact. And
Well,
then,
thank you for having that faith in him and encouraging him because
yeah,
you're doing what your elders have done for you, aren't you? You are
I guess so.
yes, you're
Guess so.
supporting the writers and you're saying, how can we do this together?
Yes, yes. And I wouldn't do that with anyone. Yusef is just a kind person. The fact that we share the experience of wanting to be in class, in a marimba ani class, he went on to take her classes, sit in on her classes, and we were getting the same information. So he came to Hunter, and there's a video of us, and we both have our Hunter IDs. They put our Hunter IDs side by side. Um, we both have our video IDs, and he said he went to Hunter looking for her specifically in the same way I went to Hunter looking for her. So we share a common understanding of an Afrocentric worldview, and that was the name of her class, African-centered worldview. And because we share that worldview, it was easy to say, okay, this is what we're going to say. And when we have conversations for our book talks, we're on the same page ideologically.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we are running out of time, believe it or not. I'd like you to talk about your writing process. And obviously you also write prose, your prose and poetry. And also, I'd like you to share what message do you have to people who are just recognizing that they truly are writers.
Thank you for that question. My writing process is chaotic. Before um, hopping on this call with you, I was just in a zone working on one of my next books. And it's one of those like today I'm not all dressed up. I put on a sweater really quickly and I kind of just tune out the world. I don't go on the internet either. I'm in my like writing cave. Like I live this sort of there's something about this concave, this the way the roof is in my attic that just really, really gives me inspiration. It makes me like shut out the world. It's all yellow here. So I know when I come here, it takes me hours to come down.
Okay.
And I don't do that every day. So I give myself 1 day a week where I shut out the world. So other times I'm writing on my kitchen counter, at the dining room table, in my bedroom, just getting in a few paragraphs here and there, but I'm always thinking. I am always thinking and imagining and plotting and thinking about my characters and the story. I've always been like that. I think my brain is wired to do that. And
Right.
for anyone realizing that they're now a writer, the thing that fuels me, the thing that gives me joy is reading. This is one of my bookshelves back here, but some of the books behind you I recognize and I'm familiar with. I have been buying books my entire adult life, so I have like hardcovers from 20 years ago, some of which I bought in Inkuru books because I used to come down to Fort Greene and just there were some stores along Fulton Avenue. There was a Senegalese restaurant that I'd go, but before you get there, I'd stop at Inkuru Books on Flatbush Avenue. So this it's part of who I am. And anyone just realizing that they're a writer now, just run with it. But be a reader first. A
Right.
reader.
Right.
Read more than you write. Not at the not maybe not at the time that you're writing, but I've had 2 decades of reading before I got published.
Right. One or two books that really have impacted you, other than Octavia Butler, as a reader.
I get to be honest here.
Okay.
You know why? Because sometimes I know my audience, and if I say one books, I'll be met with crickets. I
Okay.
say the books that I truly love. There are I although I love the other books that I mentioned too, but my top two favorite books of all time, most people have not heard of them. First one is 2000 Seasons by
Oh, I
Aida
love it.
Erma. See,
Yes.
I knew I'd get a nod because
Yes. Yes.
and a 800 page book called Indaba My Children by Vusamazulu Credo Mutwa. And it was published in 1966.
Ida.
um, and it's called African Folk Tales, and he's telling the story of the Zulu people. And it's not just a story of Zulu people, it's deep African spiritual science, folklore and mythology in a way I've never read about before. So I love African writers because they're tapping into ancient storytelling.
Well,
Uh,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for holding up Inkuru Books, which is also online.
Yes.
If you go to the Tilly Kwali site, people can still purchase books from Inkuru. And your story has been is really inspirational. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your reflections, and the books. And I want to encourage people to pick up any book by Ibi Zoboi. And I know you said you're working on your next project, but she's going to be a panelist, a speaker at the 2025 National Black Writers Symposium. So please look out for her. And you've been
Thank
listening. Thank you so much. Okay, you've been listening to Writers on Writing with your host, Dr. Brenda Greene. Please visit us at the Center for Black Literature, www.centerforblackLiterature.org. Write us at info@centerforblackLiterature.org and come back and listen to us. Watch us on our YouTube page. This radio show has been paid for by Medgar Evers College. Thank you. Remember, the writer's always reading, the reader's always writing. Keep reading and writing. Empower yourselves as readers and writers.